To instruct us today, we have Marlene Waldock, one of the nation's top communication consultants.
Communication, it's all about our lives. It's everything that we do. We start out as a baby and we cry to communicate how we feel. As we get older, we learn to talk and we learn to ask and we learn to do a lot of different things because the necessity is that we have to communicate if we want anything to happen in life. How we communicate, if we communicate effectively or not, is really the biggest issue here. So we're going to talk about three things today that are very important to the entire communication process. One is the power of a first impression. What you do first can set the stage for everything that comes after that. The second thing we're going to talk about is 4 C's that will make you a better than average communicator. And lastly is putting pop into your presentations, because speaking in public and giving a presentation is the #1 fear in life. People hate to stand up in front of a group, and yet as we pursue careers and life, we will have to do that. So those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. First impressions. Have you ever walked into a bookstore and the book captured your attention, and yet someone will say to you, well, you can't judge that book by its cover, but you pick it up because of its cover, don't you? If it's bright, colorful, if the label catches your attention, if the name of the book says something to you and you want to pick it up. And you read the inside of those pages and you decide you're going to buy that book. Well, in life, first impressions are very much like that. If it is somebody who's going to see you for the first time, if it's a job interview, or if it's the first day of school, you're in college, or it's the first time you're meeting someone that you want to have a relationship with, that very first encounter is extremely important. Because what you're trying to do at that point is lay the foundation so that you can move forward. See, communication is like building a bridge. The bridge has to span the gap to get the traveler to the other side. If the bridge fails to get to the other side of the gap, the traveler is going to fall into the abyss. So what we're talking about today is effective communication, beginning with the first impression that you make. You have to get their attention fast. So the first thing we're going to do, which I would like you to do with me, is to count to 7. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is how much time you have to make an impression. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's how much time you have to capture someone's attention. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is how much time you have to tell your story. Think about the headlines in a newspaper. What's the headline do for you? That's the first impression that you get when you look at the newspaper, is that headline. And then you go and you read this lead paragraph, which is to tell you certain things that will help you go forward. There are so many instances in which the power of a first impression is absolutely crucial to what you're doing. Think about a teacher on the first day of school. She comes into the room, he or she acts a certain way, you get a certain impression of them. Remember that a first impression is a retained image. It's the thing that will be in your head for a long time to come. We look at politicians. You know, we're in a political race right at this point in time. We have a presidential race going on, and we think about how those candidates walk on a stage, what they say first, their demeanor, how they look. There's every single thing about them is the power of a first impression. And if you make the first impression right, then you know it's easy sailing. And if you don't, you have a lot to overcome. There are 3 things that we're going to talk about as far as first impressions are concerned. One is you have to know the impression you want to make. It's strictly up to you. You want to look sophisticated, you want to look creative. What do you want? You know, there was a book I read many years ago that was called Looking Out for Number One. And the fellow who wrote the book had made $1 million. He had lost the $1 million. He made the $1 million again. He lost it again. He did it 3 or 4 times. And in one of his incarnations, he decided that the impression he was going to create was to be the authority from afar. So he would fly into an airport, He would meet with people only in the airport lounges or in the private rooms, and he would get on his jet and he would immediately leave, so that he was creating a certain type of an impression, and he was leaving this image with people that they would then carry forward with them. So there are three things. First is the impression, and you get to decide what it is that you want people to think. It's strictly up to you. You think about it when you are talking on the phone. Think about it if you are creating websites today, because everybody has personal websites and company websites and all of those kinds of things. What's the first thing you want someone to see? Think about the emails that you send. What's the first sentence? How do you say hello? What do you say? All of those things are the impression that you are going to create in the situation that you are in. Businesses have to be very, very astute at thinking about what's the company name? How do they want to name their company? What's the business card going to look like? You know, there's so many different things. Now, the second part of it that we'll talk about in a minute is the perception. See, perception is reality. You can do one thing and someone can perceive it differently. They will interpret it based on who they are. And the last part of it is changing your own perspective. So I'd like you to turn in your workbooks to page 6. Page 6 says we're going to apply the Fitt principle. First impressions count for everything. They are the retained image. So let's think about, what are the things that are happening in your own life? What do you want to be doing? What are some goals that you have? Take a minute and write them down. Think about, what do I want to have happen? You know, what is something that I'm really looking forward to? Because you have to decide what those things are, because the next question is, what's the impression that you have to make? You know, maybe you are trying to get a scholarship for the rest of your college education. Or maybe you are trying to get an internship with a certain type of company so that as you go forward into your career, you can get the job you really want. You know, what is the goal that you have? Take a minute and think about it. My goal today is that you will walk away with some information that will help you be better at what you do. So it's the director, well, all of those things you will have to make an impression, how you fill out the application, whatever type of reference letters you get and from whom are important. But when you meet one-on-one with the director, you're going to have to impress them. So you will have to think about, what is it that that director wants to see in me so that he will feel comfortable making me a resident assistant. Is that correct?
Right.
And how about you? What kind of things are you going to be doing?
I want to complete my thesis project, and I have to present my thesis to the committee.
So you're going to be doing a presentation, you're going to be doing a thesis, and how many people are in the committee?
The committee is only 3 people.
3 people, but 3 people, very interesting 3 people, right?
Yeah.
So you will have to think about, how do you want to position yourself relative to those 3 people? You know, what are they going to be looking for, and what kind of impression are you going to make? What do you want to make? What's the impression that you want to make on them?
That I know the field and everything about the field.
That you're knowledgeable?
Yeah.
That you're articulate in the way that you convey the information? Okay, there will be certain things within that thesis that you have to make the point, and you have to argue the point, and you have to come up with a conclusion. Is that correct? Okay. You will have to sit down when you go on to college and you go to different schools and you're taking jobs and different assignments. You have to sit down in front of someone and you have to have a conversation with them. They're going to interview you in some manner. So all of the things that will make the impression are how you look, how are you going to be dressed, you know, what do you want them to see when you walk into the room, how you will shake their hand and look in their eyes and do some very simple things, how you sit down, are articulate, and one of the things that is extremely important, which we will talk about during these sessions, is listening to what the other person is saying. Because when you listen, then you are much more able to respond back in a way that creates the impression that you want to create. But the important thing here is to understand that you have to know what you're after, and you have